It is 15 degrees outside in the abandoned rail yard. A 55-year-old man named Marcus crunches through the frozen dirt toward a rusted 20-foot shipping container. It has a crude scrap metal Quonset roof arched over the top. He takes out a key, unlocks a heavy steel door, and steps inside. Instantly, the freezing winter vanishes. A space heater keeps the insulated room at exactly 72 degrees. There's running water, a sink, and a real bed. Marcus slept outside in the dirt for 5 years before spending under $800 to engineer this hidden sanctuary. He finally had a locked door. We will see exactly how he built it later. But what happened next when city trucks rolled in to bulldoze this brilliant off-grid home to the ground is the part that made people across the entire country furious. You will not believe their excuse. To understand how we got here, you need to know the true scale of what is happening in American industrial zones right now. According to the federal government's own count from January 2026, over 750,000 people are currently unhoused across the country. And when you look closely at those numbers, a staggering percentage are men sleeping completely outside. They are in vehicles, in thin nylon tents, and in the frozen dirt of abandoned lots. In Rust Belt cities like Detroit and Cleveland, and massive West Coast ports from Seattle to Long Beach, the crisis is impossible to ignore. But while the human toll grows, there is a second, equally massive phenomenon happening right next to it. America is sitting on an ocean of discarded scrap. There are endless empty lots, rotting rail yards, and mountains of discarded shipping containers left behind by global trade. We have millions of tons of heavy steel sitting completely empty, rusting in the winter weather, while hundreds of thousands of men freeze to death on the pavement right beside them. A lot of people wonder why these men do not simply go to a city shelter. Local outreach workers and city records document the answer over and over again. The shelter system is broken. Men frequently report having their few remaining possessions stolen within hours of checking in. They face strict rules and curfews that make it impossible to hold down a third-shift warehouse job. They are packed into open gymnasiums with dozens of strangers. Most importantly, a temporary cot in a room full of strangers does not give a man the one thing he desperately needs to rebuild his life: a front door he can lock. The math of this situation is brutal. You have cities spending billions of dollars on 10-year plans that barely make a dent. You have men sleeping in the freezing rain tonight. And sitting just a few yards away, you have thousands of weatherproof, structural steel boxes that no one is using. It is a massive contradiction that the people in City Hall have completely failed to solve. So, desperate men stopped waiting for them. While the suits sat in heated rooms arguing over blueprints, men with no money and basic tools decided to engineer their own survival. We are going to look at exactly how they do it. This is a hidden, rapidly growing world of stealth architecture. It is an off-grid survival movement built entirely from the discarded scraps of a wealthy society. Instead of waiting 5 agonizing years for a city council to approve a new blueprint, men are venturing into junkyards every single night. They are salvaging discarded wooden pallets, heavy sheets of corrugated steel, and thrown away lithium batteries. They haul cracked PVC pipe, scavenge 2x4s, and old solar panels through the snow. Working entirely by flashlight, they piece together independent power grids and waterproof walls with incredible precision. They are welding joints in the dark. They are wiring 12-volt charge controllers and hooking up small water pumps to keep themselves from freezing to death. The psychology driving this movement is straightforward. A man sleeping on freezing concrete tonight cannot wait for a committee to vote on his survival. He needs a roof right now. And it turns out that a man with a cordless saw and a few $100s of salvage scrap can construct a safer, warmer, and more secure environment in a single weekend than a city planner can manage in half a decade. A $50 million government shelter project might look fantastic on a mayor's glossy press release, but for the men actually living in the dirt, a $500 pile of reclaimed steel and plywood offers something fundamentally more valuable. It offers immediate, undeniable dignity. It gives them a physical barrier against the bitter winter wind and a quiet, locked space where they do not have to sleep with one eye open just to keep their boots from being stolen. This invisible, hyper-efficient survival network is spreading quietly from city to city. It operates entirely undetected by the very people who failed these men in the first place. But to truly understand how incredibly sophisticated this grassroots engineering has become, You have to look closely at what one man managed to build when his back was completely against the wall. You have to step back to the beginning and look at the life of Marcus. He took a discarded metal box and turned it into a fortress. We're going to break down his exact blueprint, piece by piece. In 2023, on the frozen outskirts of Chicago, a 55-year-old former tradesman named Marcus found himself completely out of options. Marcus was not an addict. He was not a tragic statistic waiting to happen. He was a skilled carpenter who had spent 3 decades framing houses until a sudden string of medical debts and a subsequent job loss wiped out his life savings. Like so many others, he fell through the cracks of a broken system and ended up sleeping in a thin nylon tent near a set of abandoned railroad tracks. He spent 4 brutal winters surviving on the cold pavement. Then, while walking through a deserted industrial lot, he found a discarded 20-foot steel shipping container. It was rusted, empty, and completely invisible to the rest of the world. Marcus later told a local reporter that he looked at that heavy steel box and realized it was the strongest foundation he had seen in years. He immediately went to work. Marcus knew that a flat steel roof would pull freezing rain and eventually cave under heavy snow. So he scavenged heavy sheets of corrugated tin from a nearby junkyard. Using basic hand tools, he bent the tin into a perfect arch. He bolted it firmly to the top of the container to create a classic Quonset roof that would effortlessly shed the severe winter weather. Next, he focused on the freezing interior. He spent exactly $150 on salvage foam insulation boards, cutting them precisely to line the steel walls and trap the heat. For plumbing, he rigged a basic camping sink and wired a 12-volt water pump that he bought for just $40. He hauled in a discarded mattress and framed a sturdy wooden bed to keep himself off the cold floor. Piece by piece, a master carpenter turned forgotten metal box into a fully functioning home. The total cost for his materials came out to exactly $780. For the first time in half a decade, Marcus had a solid front door he could lock. He could turn on his heater, listen to the snow hit the tin roof, and finally sleep through the night without fear. He had engineered his own salvation out of the city's discarded trash. But his quiet triumph was about to hit a brick wall. Just as the worst of the winter storms approached, a white truck with city decals pulled into the empty lot. The city of Chicago did not celebrate Marcus for solving his own homelessness. Instead, a code enforcement officer backed a white city truck right up to the edge of the abandoned lot, stepped out into the freezing wind, and began writing citations. The official reasoning behind the government's response is completely absurd. City records show that the Department of Buildings slapped a bright orange notice on the heavy steel door. They cited the structure for multiple zoning violations and declared a severe safety hazard. They argued that an unpermitted steel box sitting on a forgotten patch of dirt violated urban planning codes written decades ago. Keep in mind, this was a city where thousands of men were already sleeping in nylon tents that regularly caught fire from open propane stoves. Yet, the city's immediate priority was to target a man who had safely insulated himself inside a non-flammable steel box. The paperwork came with a devastating threat. It explicitly warned Marcus that if he did not dismantle the structure and leave within 72 hours, the city would deploy a heavy sanitation crew. They would confiscate his home, tear it apart, and haul the scrap metal to the dump. Furthermore, they threatened to hit him with daily fines that a homeless man could never possibly pay. The irony of this moment is staggering. A massive city government, completely incapable of providing this man with a safe room, was demanding that he leave his heated home and go back to sleeping on the unprotected pavement. They were not offering him a better alternative. They were simply ordering him to suffer in a way that fit neatly into their rulebook. Marcus refused to leave. He told a local reporter that he looked at the orange sticker, looked at the heavy lock on his door, and made his choice. He would rather be arrested than freeze to death because a guy in a suit did not like his paperwork. He barricaded himself inside. It was a tense standoff between a man trying to survive and a system trying to erase him. But to understand why the city was so dangerously wrong about his home being a hazard, you have to look closely at the sheer mechanical brilliance of what he actually built. You will be amazed at the engineering. If you look closely at the actual nuts and bolts of what Marcus engineered, the city's claim that his home was a safety hazard completely falls apart. Independent contractors who later saw the structure noted that he had inadvertently met, and in some cases exceeded, basic off-grid building standards. Take the heating system. Instead of relying on a dangerous, open-flame propane stove inside a tent, Marcus had installed a small, enclosed diesel parking heater. He drilled a precise exhaust port right through the heavy corrugated steel wall using a borrowed hole saw. He safely vented all the harmful carbon monoxide outside. That single piece of equipment, running on just a few dollars of fuel a week, kept the insulated interior at a perfect 72 degrees, even when the winter wind chill outside plummeted to 15 degrees. For electricity, he did not illegally tap into the city power grid. He wired 2 discarded 100-watt solar panels directly to the scrap metal Quonset roof. Those panels fed into a salvaged 12-volt deep cycle marine battery that he had pulled from a scrapyard, hidden safely under his wooden bed frame. That small power bank provided more than enough energy to run overhead LED lights, keep a cell phone charged for emergencies, and operate his water pump. The plumbing was equally brilliant. The arched Quonset roof was not just designed to shed heavy snow. It acted as a massive rainwater catchment system. The runoff funneled perfectly into a cracked PVC gutter that he had zip-tied to the edge. It drained directly into a series of 5-gallon water jugs equipped with a basic charcoal filtration bucket. This was not a pile of dangerous urban blight. It was a masterclass in off-grid engineering, and the desperate men freezing in the nylon tents nearby immediately recognized it. Within weeks, other unhoused men in the industrial park began approaching Marcus. They asked him to help them design their own 12-volt electrical grids and safely vent their own makeshift shelters. He had created a fully functioning, winter-proof home for less than $800. A man with absolutely nothing had built a blueprint for survival. But the true tragedy hits you when you step back and look at the math. Compare his $800 achievement to what the city was doing with its own money. Compare that to what happened in Chicago with the city's official affordable housing programs. In 2023, while Marcus was hauling scrap metal through the snow with his bare hands, the city was sitting on a massive $300 million bond. That money was earmarked specifically to end the homelessness crisis. But instead of immediately getting people out of the cold, that money went straight into a black hole of paperwork. According to city records and independent audits, millions of dollars were drained almost instantly by endless committee meetings. They paid expensive external consultant fees. They conducted years of mandatory environmental reviews for empty concrete lots. The city literally spent more money on zoning impact studies than Marcus had spent to survive over the last 5 years. By the time a single foundation was finally poured, the financial math had become completely indefensible. The average cost to build just one single official transitional housing unit skyrocketed to an astonishing $800,000. And even after spending that exorbitant amount of money, the system still failed the men it was supposed to protect. According to government's own tracking data, roughly 40% of the individuals who actually managed to navigate the years-long waiting lists and move into these official temporary shelters ended up right back on the freezing streets. $300 million, and nearly half the people wound up homeless again. They cited the exact same systemic problems: impossible curfews, rampant theft of their personal belongings, and a complete lack of physical autonomy. The contrast tells you everything you need to know about why these systems are failing. City Hall spent hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, took half a decade just to approve basic construction blueprints, and produced tiny apartments that cost $800,000 each. Meanwhile, a homeless man with an $800 budget and a battery-powered drill solved his own housing problem in a single weekend. $800,000 for a broken promise. $800 for a locked door, a warm bed, and a heated room. Imagine that for a second. This staggering failure is exactly why the stealth architecture movement is no longer isolated to just one frozen rail yard in Illinois. When men realize the cavalry is not coming, they stop waiting. They start building. And what started as one man's desperate attempt to survive the winter has quietly become an unstoppable nationwide tide. We will see where it spread next. And Marcus is not the only one. Across the country, a quiet, completely decentralized survival movement is taking root in the shadows of major American cities. In Detroit, local reporters documented an unhoused mechanic who spent $400 insulating the back of an abandoned delivery truck. He wired it with a salvaged alternator to run an electric heater through the bitter winters. In Seattle, witnesses recalled seeing a group of men construct an incredible micro-cabin tucked high up into the concrete girders of an active highway overpass. It was built entirely from discarded shipping pallets and insulated with salvage foam. They painted it dull gray, making it completely invisible to the thousands of daily commuters driving past just 10 feet away from them. These men do not operate in total isolation. They are actively sharing their blueprints and their hard-earned survival knowledge. They pass hand-drawn diagrams between encampments. They teach each other how to safely vent diesel heaters without poisoning themselves. They share exactly where to scavenge the best discarded lithium batteries and how to splice heavy-gauge wiring without starting a fire. They pool their modest funds to buy screws, foam insulation, and scrap metal from local junkyards. The response from local authorities has been an ongoing, deeply frustrating game of cat and mouse. In some cities, the moment a city drone spots a hidden Quonset roof, a heavy bulldozer is dispatched to crush the hand-built structure into useless scrap. But in other industrial towns, city workers are quietly looking the other way. They look the other way because they know the official shelters are completely full tonight. They know the multi-million-dollar housing programs are failing. And they know that destroying a man's heated room in the middle of January is nothing more than a death sentence. When the bulldozers do come, the builders simply adapt. If a city sanitation crew crushes a microhome on a Tuesday, these men will salvage whatever rusted hinges, screws, and solar panels they can pull from a wreckage. By Friday, they are rebuilding the exact same structure 3 miles away. They bury it even deeper into the labyrinth of rotting rail yards and forgotten lots. You cannot bulldoze a survival instinct, but for the men actually living this reality, the vast national movement fades away the moment the freezing sun goes down. All that matters is the immediate physical world right in front of them and the temperature dropping outside. So, how are unhoused men across the country surviving the coldest months of the year while politicians debate endless multi-million-dollar blueprints? They are not waiting for a 10-year plan to reach year 3. They are picking up cordless drills, salvaging discarded steel, and quietly engineering their own survival. Nobody grows up wanting to live in an abandoned shipping container. It is not a glamorous solution. But when the reality is sleeping on freezing pavement or navigating a broken shelter system where your boots might get stolen, a makeshift Quonset roof hidden in a junkyard is a masterpiece. It beats a wet tent in the dirt every single time. Return to Marcus for a moment. Picture him walking back through the freezing snow after a long day of trying to find work. He approaches that rusted metal box. He slides a key into the padlock. He hears the heavy mechanical click of the deadbolt. He steps inside, closes the door, and turns on his small 12-volt heater. In that quiet moment, as the insulated room warms up to 72 degrees, Marcus is not a statistic. He is just a man who finally has a space that belongs completely to him. A man needs a locked door. There are still hundreds of thousands of people out there tonight, bracing against a winter wind with absolutely nowhere to go. They need real help, not more promises. And if you care about this incredible grassroots movement and want to know how you can actually help the builders in your own city, I have put together a free guide. It outlines the specific local organizations that are defending these off-grid survival builds. It gives you practical ways to support them, even if you have never picked up a tape measure yourself. You can find a link in the description below. If this video opened your eyes to the reality of stealth architecture, hit subscribe. I cover hidden stories like this every week, the kind that show you what desperate Americans are actually building when the city cameras are not rolling. And click the video on screen right now. The investigation I covered there connects directly to the system you just watched fail. I will see you in that one.